with the democratization of Africa, the case of Uganda in comparative perspective. Last week we discussed part one of the corruption section involving government departments, which explains how institutional corruption has invaded the NRM system. And at the time we signed off last time, I had quoted a report of the Auditor General, which the last sentence of which was, the committee recommends that His Excellency Professor Gilbert Bukenya be personally held liable for the loss of over 6 billion shillings and flouting PPDA, the Public Procurement and Disposal Act law, and the abuse of office. That was the recommendation of the Auditor General to take action against His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Gilbert Bukenya. On May 23rd, 2011, Vice President Gilbert Bukenya's political star started waning. President Museveni asked Bukenya to resign from the vice presidency. Vice President Bukenya was dropped from the cabinet during a cabinet reshuffle. Gilbert Bukenya was arrested and charged on October 3rd, 2011, by the IGG, the Inspector General of Government, on one count of abuse of office, contrary to Section 11 of the Anti-Corruption Act 2011. Remember, I went through this act, the corruption crimes which were enacted in this act, and one of them was abuse of office, and this is the crime for which the Vice President was charged. And one count of fraudulent practice contrary to Section 95, subsection 1D of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act 2003. These two charges clearly reflect the Auditor General's conclusions and recommendations, which I just quoted. Under count 1, the particulars of the offense alleged that between December 2006 and November 2007, Dr. Bukenya, in abuse of his office, directed the award of a contract for the supply of executive vehicles to Musoke Uganda Limited. Quote, in total disregard of the laws, regulations, and practices governing public procurements, unquote. In count 2, Bukenya was charged with fraudulent practice contrary to Section 95(1)(d) of the Public Procurement Disposal Act, because he colluded with Musoke Uganda Limited to commit fraudulent acts, so to speak, conniving and or colluding to to award a contract of supply of 80 units of BMWs, police outsider motorcycles intended for use during the CHOGM 2007 to Motorcare Uganda Limited. Before the trial took place, the charges against Bukenya were withdrawn by the IGG on November 3rd, 2011. The explanation given by the IGG to withdraw the charges was that Spear Motors, one of the unsuccessful bidders in the procurement process, was suing the government. Bukenya, the accused in the case, in that case, brought by the IGG, however, put a different spin on the withdrawal of the charges. According to Bukenya and his supporters, the case was withdrawn because the IGG did not have enough evidence for a conviction of Bukenya on the charges against him. Another argument, which sounds more credible but has a lot of loopholes, nevertheless, is that the offense of abuse of office based on the Anti-Corruption Act 2009 was enacted after the offense was committed in 2006 and 2007, and therefore violates the constitutional provision that prohibits what we call in law ex post facto legislation or retrospective criminal laws. Let us look at the issue of ex post facto laws first. Article 28, Article 7 of the 1995 Constitution of Uganda provides that, quote, no person shall be charged with or convicted of a criminal offense which is founded on an act or omission that did not, at the time it took place, constitute a criminal offense, unquote. The intent of the constitutional provision is very clear. It prohibits the prosecution of a criminal offense that was not illegal at the time it took place. Clearly, corruption in the form of abuse of office or fraud was a crime in 2006 and 2007 when Bukenya engaged in the public procurement process for CHOGM. Indeed, many people have been charged and convicted under those same old laws for similar offenses which preceded the Anti-Corruption Act 2009. In fact, the Anti-Corruption 2009, which is alleged to be ex post facto, simply consolidated the old laws in the Penal Code, which I referred to at the beginning of my earlier conversation, and the Prevention of Corruption Act of 1970 and other laws on corruption into one comprehensive act as required by the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which Uganda ratified in 2005. Retroactivity cannot, therefore, be a valid defense for Bukenya against the charges brought by the IGG. More specifically, the charge of abuse of office, public office, against Bukenya was part of the law on corruption at the time Bukenya committed the crime. The charge of abuse of public office was not an innocent act when Bukenya committed it. Therefore, the Anti-Corruption Act 2009, in this specific case, under which Bukenya was charged with abuse of office, does not violate Article 28 of the Constitution. That's my opinion. The crimes Bukenya is charged with, or was charged with at that time, did exist when he committed the acts. Second, the second charge was based on Section 95 of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, which was enacted in 2003. The second charge against Bukenya does not in any way violate Article 28 of the Constitution, prohibiting retroactivity of a legislative criminal law. The retroactivity argument should therefore be dismissed, and it is clear that we are here dealing with what I comprehensively earlier on called institutional corruption. Corruption that is part and parcel of the regime itself. Nevertheless, we must point out that the ex post facto doctrine may be invoked if the punishment under the Anti-Corruption Act 2009 law is greater than that which would have been imposed under the law when the crime was committed. This issue has not been raised and can only be raised after the accused is convicted at the time of sentencing. In any case, the argument is a long shot that cannot justify dropping the charges against Bukenya on grounds of ex post facto doctrine. In other words, charging a person with an act that was not criminal at the time it was committed. The second issue has to do with the general explanation for withdrawing the charges against Bukenya. The IGG gave the reason of the government being sued by the Spear Motors company as the justification to withdraw the charges against Bukenya. First, the IGG did not stipulate specific grounds on which the civil suit against the government by Spear Motors was based. The mere fact that the government of Uganda is being sued by a company which participated in the tender offering is not sufficient, in my opinion, to withdraw charges against Bukenya if the charges are well founded in law, as we have explained above. Moreover, the Auditor General's report on the same subject pointed out many irregularities and missing funds in a report to Parliament. So the gaps and the inconsistencies must be explained. Here, again, Bukenya's case tends to show us that there is institutional corruption involved in the process of prosecuting criminal acts under the NRM regime. Corruption in other government departments or agencies. Another notorious scandal whose investigation was also headed by Justice Sebutinde probed corruption in the police force. Uganda police force has the notoriety of being ranked as the most corrupt government agency. The Commission of Inquiry found that the police, especially traffic police, take bribes from drivers. Files of cases under investigation mysteriously disappear within the department, and a long list of ghost employees was on payroll, draining the Ugandan treasury. The Commission of Inquiry recommended further investigations of those suspected to have violated the law or committed crimes by the DPP department, Director of Public Prosecutions. Some police officers were supported to be disciplined or dismissed, but in fact, they were neither investigated, disciplined, nor dismissed. As far as we know, we are aware, none of the recommendations made by the Commission, 17-day Commission that is, was implemented. Again, pointing to one fact, that institutional corruption has outworn the morality and ethics within the NRM regime. The most recent report of the Auditor General on the police has found that 2,449 ghost employees were still on police payroll in July 2009, resulting in payments of shillings 328.2 million every month. That is every month, 1 month, to ghost police officers. Now, the government is telling us they don't have money to pay teachers, and yet the police ghost employees are able to be paid 328.2 million shillings every month. The Public Accounts Committee of Parliament promised further investigations and punishment of the culprits. In February 2011, when the police leadership realized that the Public Accounts Committee was going to ask questions or investigate the issue, police leadership voluntarily deleted 2,000 names of ghost police officers who were mainly located in the mobile police patrol unit and the anti-stock theft unit. These facts, these reports can be found in the Monitor newspaper report published on January 17, 2012. And so this is not speculation, and this is not tarnishing the good name of NRM regime. Now, we come to one of the most notorious scandal, the big one, the mismanagement of the Global Fund. I'm giving out these details because it is important to understand the gravity, the extent, and the depth of corruption within NRM. The Global Fund scandal illustrates institutionalized corruption within NRM and the government NRM created. The Global Fund scandal was investigated by a commission of inquiry chaired by Justice James Ogola. The commission found that ministers and other recipients of Global Fund money billed the Global Fund for ghost trips that never occurred and inflated hotel charges. There were large amounts of forged receipts uncovered by the Global Fund Commission of Inquiry presented for payment to the Global Fund. The Ministry of Health illegally authorized the payment of Richikairi's medical bills in Nairobi at the request of who? Of President Museveni, who sent a note, a scribbled note, to Jim Muhwez, the Minister of Health, to use Global Fund money to pay the medical bills, which amounted to $25,000. The Ministry of Health illegally spent $19,832 to send the Minister of Health on a trip to lobby for Ugandan running for the post of Director General of WHO, the World Health Organization. Both of these expenses should not have been charged on the Global Fund. The Ministry of Health was also corrupt in hiring the employees of the Global Fund unit. The Commission found that nepotism, which is one of the crimes in the Anti-Corruption Act, and I mentioned that last week, was rampant in hiring employees to work for the Global Fund unit. The Commission found that the most qualified candidates were not hired in preference to those supported by the top officials of the Ministry of Health. Individuals, Ugandans, also exploited the Global Fund for their own benefit. Ted says J. He formed a dummy corporation known as the Uganda Center for Accountability. What an ironical name. Uganda Center for Accountability was a corporation which was incorporated by Ted Says Church, which received $70,000 supposedly to monitor and evaluate sub-recipients of the Global Fund money. The Commission found that the Uganda Center for Accountability had no accounting capacity. Che simply withdrew the money from the Uganda Center for Accountability and spent it on his personal business. Che was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, for which he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is the harshest prison term that was ever given out. But all the others, like those in the ministry, the Prime Minister's office, have gotten away with just a fraction of the sentence which Jay was given. Another company, the National Forum for People Living with HIV/AIDS, received $160,000 from the Global Fund, for which it was supposed to channel to 21 other groups, but the company directors kept half of the money for themselves. They also billed the Global Fund for expenses that were suspicious, according to the report of the inquiry into the Global Fund scandal. In order to put in context the problem of corruption in Uganda, we shall briefly narrate its most graphic illustration as revealed by the findings of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, published in a report in February 2007. The extent to which institutional corruption has penetrated the Ugandan body politic and thereafter spread into its tentacles in society itself is well documented and best illustrated by the findings of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry appointed by the President himself on September 6, 2005. The findings of the Commission reveal a complex network of corrupt officials who are capable of siphoning a large percentage of Uganda GDP and of foreign aid, which is crucial to the lives of the poor people and those vulnerable to or infected by disease. What is more interesting but also alarming in this case is the fact that institutional corruption infects the social fabric from the top to the bottom. Remember the quotation I gave you in my initial conversation on this topic of corruption from Molika, that corruption rain is like rain. It drops from the top to the bottom. What we presented in the previous conversation was, to a great extent, theoretical. What we present in this conversation and the previous one is from a practical experience of the operation of institutional corruption within NRM. Those who would deny the existence of institutional corruption from a theoretical point of view should be ready to acknowledge its existence as it is graphically narrated in the following in the part of my conversation. The facts presented in this conversation are reliable because they were discovered by the testimony given on oath under the penalties of perjury. They were confirmed by an impartial judicial inquiry. That's why I want this information to come out so that people can distinguish between a mere allegation or report by a newspaper and a finding, a judicial finding by a commission of inquiry. The following narrative of the mismanagement of the Global Fund tells the story of institutional corruption briefly, but nevertheless as vividly as corruption can be described in any detail as it takes place in Uganda. In any corruption story, like all criminal enterprises, many pieces may be missing and therefore may have to be reconstructed. That is why the commissions of inquiry are necessary weapons in combating corruption. Corruption scandals are not new in Uganda, and the endemic nature of the corruption in Uganda is revealed by the number of commissions of inquiry which have been set up by the government itself, ostensibly to expose and combat corruption, but so far without any substantial effect. Past commissions of inquiry include the Besweri Molondo Commission, 1996, 17-day Commission of Inquiry into Corruption in the Police Force, 17-day Commission of Inquiry into the purchase of junk helicopters, which we discussed earlier during my last conversation, 17-day Commission into Corruption in Uganda Revenue Authority, the Porter Commission of Inquiry. Porter was a justice of the High Court into the corrupt practices in Uganda's involvement in Congo gold scandals. The IGG, Inspector General of Government, report on mismanagement of Gavi funds triggered by the recommendations and findings from the Global Fund Commission. And finally, more recently, a commission of inquiry into the mismanagement of Kampala City Council. Added to these commissions of inquiry, the annual reports of the Auditor General, which document serious violations of procedures in government procurement involving billions of shillings, lost and substandard construction work, which are nevertheless ignored every year as if they never existed. And the Abu Kenya scandal is one of those, which we have I given the details about. The only explanation for this, in my opinion, is that the democratic process is suppressed and therefore is not producing the expected results. It has no impact by putting a dent on institutional corruption. It can't, because the regime is both corrupt and undemocratic. And therefore, democracy is not a powerful instrument to expose all these scandals. But even when they are exposed through the commissions of inquiry I've enumerated, the reports of the commissions of inquiry are shelved on and they are never implemented, as you are all aware. That again shows the extent of institutional corruption, the failure to implement the recommendations of these commissions. It's a waste of time, waste of money, because the regime is not ready, is not willing even to punish those who have been identified by impartial judicial commissions of inquiry. So, the long list of commissions of inquiry and annual Auditor General's reports, with the exception of the Global Fund Commission of Inquiry, as we shall see, did nothing more than smell the foul stench of corruption in Uganda. These numerous inquiries produced no casualties. Corruption inquiries, unfortunately, rarely do where corruption is institutionalized, as is the case in Uganda. Hence, the cliche that reports of inquiry do nothing more than gather dust on the bookshelves. The explanation is not that in Uganda there was no corruption that was unearthed or uncovered by the area numerous commissions of inquiry refer to. In fact, a lot of corruption was discovered. The explanation for lack of action is simply that corruption in Uganda is so deeply institutionalized that only a change of regime can produce desirable consequences. The previous commissions of inquiries did expose corruption, but there was no enforcement of the recommendations of the commissions of inquiry due to entrenched institutional corruption. We must remember that NRM itself, as we have demonstrated in other conversations, is a political reincarnation founded on corrupt political principles, which we explained earlier, that suppressed freedom, which we do not need to explore in this particular conversation again. What distinguishes the Global Fund Judicial Inquiry was from all those the others enumerated above is the fact that, unlike the others, it was initiated by forces from outside Uganda which could not be silenced by internal threats or politically compromised by the shady political deals that go on within NRM regime. The results of the commissions of inquiry in the mismanagement of the Global Fund are therefore unique and different from the previous inquiries. They have been, they had some teeth behind them. The major findings and recommendations of the Global Fund Commission of Inquiry had to be enforced under the law because the mighty sword of the foreign donors was precariously hanging over NRM's head. Substitute NRM for Museveni's head. During, something had to be done. Albeit, reluctantly, 3 ministers of health, Captain Michael Mukula, Dr. Alex Kamugisha, and the Honorable Jim Mwezi, were indicted for the crimes we described below. So far, only 4 individuals, Ted says Chei, attached to the Economic Bureau in the President's Office of ISO, in Internal Security Organization, and Freddy Kavuma Salon, who was working for UTV, but also, he was attached to the President's Office, and 2 women, Annalisa Mondon and Elizabeth Ngororano have so far been convicted in the High Court by the Anti-Corruption Court and sent to prison in over many years after the commission into the Global Fund delivered its report. The casualties of the Global Fund inquiry, therefore, are very few compared to the damage done and the evidence of the criminal conduct exposed, as the following narrative will clearly reveal. The total loot from the Global Fund within about 1 year was estimated at 1.6 billion shillings by the Commission of Inquiry. Now this is looting, from one institution in 1 year, 1.6 billion shillings, and we don't have money for the teachers. Later on, I'm going to deal with the impact of corruption on the economy and society, and these facts will be reinterpreted and given new meaning. The Global Fund Judicial Commission of Inquiry, chaired by Justice James Ogola, was appointed following the suspension of all 5 Global Fund grants to Uganda by the Global Fund Secretariat based in Geneva. That's the only reason why this inquiry had to be implemented, because it had an external pressure on the government. The decision to suspend the grants was based on the findings and the recommendations in an audit report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, the Global Fund's local agent, published in August 2005. The terms of reference of the Commission hint at what had seriously gone wrong with the management of the Global Fund under the Minister of Health headed by Jim Wes at the time. The mandate of the Commission of Inquiry was to investigate specific allegations made by the Global Fund on the mismanagement of the Global Fund aid to Uganda by the Project Management Unit, PMU, located in the Ministry of Health. First, and specifically, the Commission was to find out the basis for procurement and expenditure decisions within PMU which were not consistent with the Global Fund criteria or government procedures under PPDA, Public Procurement and Disposal Act. Second, the Commission was also to look into the PMU's selection of the sub-recipients and their competence to carry out their assigned tasks, and PMU's failure to follow up the sub-recipients who did not account for their funds, as well as the involvement of PMU in loss of grants. Now it is the 60 minutes after 4. Let me take a short break here, and then I'll be back to continue. Thank you very much.
People to demonstrate.
The mouthpiece of all Ugandans, wherever they may be, to voice their problems without fear of any retribution. The Voice of Uganda Radio works in sync with FADU, the Federalist Alliance of Democracy and Development in Uganda. FADU is an organization that was formed to work as a platform for all Ugandans at home and outside, to work synergistically to liberate our mother Uganda from the ruthless invaders that have sucked it dry. Therefore, FADU invites all able Ugandans to act now and save the Ugandan humanity that is being slaughtered, destroyed, and robbed by a few people unworthy to call themselves Ugandans. Many people are crying for action in Uganda as they languish in misery. FADU echoes their cries by making the loudest alarm to everyone to join FADU, not tomorrow or the next Ugandans. Many people are crying for action in Uganda as they languish in misery. FADU echoes their cries by making the loudest alarm to everyone to join.
Hello. After the break, now I'm back to with the second part of my conversation, the concluding part on corruption. Before the break, I gave you two reasons the mandate concerning the mandate of the Global Fund Commission of Inquiry. The third one, the Commission had to establish the basis for recruiting all PMU, the Public Management Unit officials, and their competence to do their jobs. This last one is very important because not only does it illustrate the nature and the pervasiveness of institutional corruption, it shows the gravity because some people may be raising questions. Is it possible to reform NRM to eliminate? This is only why I'm wasting, or maybe not wasting, but devoting a lot of time to give these details, is to show you, to convince you that there is no way you can cure this disease by simply reforming NRM, because you can't reform NRM at this point because the problem of corruption is institutionalized. So you need more drastic action. In addition to the commission in the Global Fund was to look into allegations that Stanbic Bank and DFCU Bank applied exchange rates that were significantly below the market rates to somebody's benefit. The mandate of the Commission of Inquiry was therefore very, very broad, and the evidence of corruption exposed was extensive. That's the value of the Global Fund Commission of Inquiry. It really throws light into the dark corners of NRM corruption. For our purposes, we shall concentrate on three aspects of the management of PMU, which clearly illustrate the nature and voracity of the monster we call institutional corruption, which we are primarily interested in on the war against corruption. The major problem in the management of PMU was political influence injected into the Global Fund management by the Minister of Health, Jim Mwezi. Under the law, and the Global Fund Manual, PMU management was supposed to be insulated from political influence. However, Jim Moise did not only illegally control the appointment of the officials of PMU, Public Management Unit, he also used PMU as an NRM piggy bank to pay medical bills for an NRM official in Nairobi, as we mentioned, to pay bills for his personal cell phone, and used PMU as a source of funds to make trips which were either ineligible for Global Fund money or to fund ghost trips. The term ghost appears a lot of time in so many places that have to do with the corruption. The ghost trips were carried out, or which were never carried out, purportedly for the supervision of Global Fund activities, which in fact never took place. But the money for the trips was requisitioned and pocketed by 3 ministers. Let us look, first of all, look at the recruitment of PMU employees. The Judicial Commission made it clear that the, quote, minister had no business at all injecting himself or his political influence into the recruitment and appointment process of the PMU's project coordinator or any other PMU staff for that matter, unquote. The commission added, quote, the minister had no authority whatsoever in the matter. As for the final decision to appoint was under PIM, the Project Implementation Manual, specifically reserved for the Permanent Secretary Ministry of Health, unquote. Nevertheless, the minister apparently determined that PMU must be controlled by NRM and ignored all the rules and warnings and interjected himself in the recruitment process of PMU officials, resulting inevitably into the recruitment of an incompetent management team at the Global Fund. A few chilling examples are revealing. One of Jim Moise's appointee was Paula Tuliahikayo. Tuliahikayo was appointed in spite of the fact that she was less qualified than the other candidates for the same job, prompting the judicial inquiry to comment that, quote, the appointment of Mrs. Paula Tuliahikayo in preference to the best-rated candidate remains questionable. Her political, ethnic, and other relationships with the people having undue influence on the PMU, particularly so of Honorable Moise, should be investigated. So the explanation, according to the Commission, was simple. Good performance with such undeserving job promotion would be too much of an expectation from the ministry. Organizations function best when their employees are both qualified to do the job and competent to perform their duties. Corruption, unfortunately, in order to thrive, tends to undermine these two qualities of qualification and competence of an employee. Corruption exploits weakness and avoids transparency, thereby eventually crippling or even destroying the organization itself. This explains both the poor economic performance of corrupt regimes and corruption of undemocratic regimes. So when you see the economy in trouble, when you see management incompetent, when you see the infrastructure rotting and crumbling, don't divorce those consequences from corruption. It's corruption that is causing those situations. So we go into this not without a very good reason. It is, and a regime like that should not be in power, should not be after 27 years. Imagine that Museveni has no shame. Of course, he has never been an ethical man, and he wants to run again, promising you what? The same, which is corruption and the destruction of the infrastructure and the economy. So the Judicial Commission found more problems in the recruitment process within PMU. PMU's own recruitment proved to be highly haphazard and in certain instances downright unprofessional, especially as regards lack of transparency. Hence, the recruitment of Ms. Moheki was quoting the commission, was not advertised at all. There was no job description. It was consummated only through alleged telephone interviews, unquote. And nepotism. Nepotism is one of the crimes I outlined in my introductory conversation, pointed out is one of the crimes under the Anti-Corruption Act of 2009. Now to this, all these incompetencies, you add nepotism to lack of transparency, and in these employees being chosen not because they are the best, but because that's what the people who are appointing them want to appoint. And there was also Mugisha's appointment, which sums up NRM institutional corruption in the Ministry of Health under Jim Mohuez. For example, the recruitment of Mr. Julius Mugisha lacked transparency. The job advertisement interviews were questionable. His lack of accounting knowledge and experience was clearly exhibited by his poor accounting postings, just as PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, had observed in their report. So Mugisha's family relationship as the son of a minister in the Ministry of Health was the determining factor in influencing his appointment to the ministry, to the PMU, the Public Management Unit, to a post that was as lofty as they described it, as his experience and competence were pedestrian. The Judicial Commission of further commented that, quote, political and other undue influence should be expunged from the recruitment process of all project staff, unquote. Moreover, political and all other undue influences in the entire selection process should be eschewed. I'm outlining all this because, as you know, Jim Muhwez was, the case against him was withdrawn, and the other minister too. And so you can see that institutional corruption is a deadly disease. It is not that no crime was committed or no law was violated. It's because the individual being charged has more influence in the system than those prosecuting him have. However, the corruption of the management of the Global Fund culminated in the appointment of the PMU coordinator, Dr. Muhebwa, in 2003, in a process that was heavily weighed down by political influence. Jim Muhwez directly interfered in the appointment of Dr. Muhebwa as coordinator of PMU. On May 15, 2003, Muhwez wrote to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, Mohamed Kezara, specifically instructing him what to do in clear violation of the law and the Global Fund Manual. The commission found that Muhwez wrote to the permanent secretaries, quote, strictly injuncting him not to constitute the PMU until clearance with me after I returned from the 56th World Health Assembly in Geneva, and adding for good measure that the permanent secretary and the director of General Health Services was to, quote, diligently follow those instructions, unquote. In a subsequent office memorandum written on November 24, 2003, after the IGG intervention in the Muhweza-Mutumba appointment dispute, Muhwez directed the permanent secretary of Ministry of Health to go ahead and appoint the management unit of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria as per decision months ago. The decision was made earlier on, and Muhwez was simply instructing the permanent secretary to carry them out. In May 2003, meeting Muhwez, the permanent secretary, and Professor Omaswa, the fatal, really corrupt decision to appoint Dr. Muhebwa in preference to Dr. Mutumba was sealed. In their conclusion, the Judicial Commission found that Dr. Muhebwa's appointment to the office of PMU project coordinator in preference to the best-rated candidate for that post lacked transparency, to say the least. It raised the queries of possible political or even family connections with powerful and influential personalities, especially Muhwez, Minister Muhwez, who was in charge of the Ministry of Health. And so the Ministry of Health, more specifically the Judicial Commission, found that Dr. Muhebwa, quote, invariably bowed to political pressure from Minister Muhwez to disburse funds to questionable recipients and to incessant diversions of funds from the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Kezara, and quote, moreover, Dr. Muhebwa sidelined and effectively excluded the key EMU officers who should have participated in these selections and allocations, namely the Civil Sector Coordinator, called Mizi Magambo, and the Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist called Ms. Moheki. In fact, Dr. Mohebwa was involved in the payment of large amounts of global fund money to individuals, either in cash or by check, for banking in their personal accounts. It is therefore not surprising that the Commission reached a conclusion that left no doubt about Dr. Muhebwa's competence. Quote, all in all, Dr. Muhebwa's management competence and experience were woefully deficient. This led to egregious financial loss to the General Global Fund, suspension of the project, disbandment of PMU, and appointment of his judicial commission to look into all these issues. So, Jim Muhwezi's political tentacles were elastic, they were tenuous, and they were very long within NRM corrupt regime. They stretched far beyond PMU headquarters in Kampala into rural organizations created to receive global fund money. For example, the Rukingiri Gender and Development Association, abbreviated as RUGADA, located in Muhwezi's constituents, was allocated 188 million 330,000 shillings as a local agent. As it happened, Muhwezi was Rugada's patron. So you can see conflict of interest here. I mentioned all these crimes in my introductory conversation. Conflict of interest is a crime under the Anti-Corruption Act 2009. If true, it means that if these allegations are true, it means that conflict of interest would be inevitable. Besides that, there was no capacity and competence in Uganda to perform its obligation. The Judicial Commission, for example, found Uganda, quote, lacked the capacity to conduct global fund activities. It mixed up expenditures, some of which were suspicious. The main witness lacked full knowledge of Uganda's handling of general global fund funds and was evasive on the issue of Honorable Muhwezi's being Uganda's patron. So you can see the problems we have. Under the Judicial Commission of Inquiry as documentation, there was exhibit number 470. It read, H.E., that is His Excellency, the President's letter of request. On it, it was Jim Muhwezi's, quote, handwritten instructions to Dr. Muhebwa. After examining the evidence of the Commission, they concluded that the selection and allocation of global fund monies appeared to have been heavily swayed by the political influence of Minister Mohuez, who directed PMU's Mohebwa to disburse money to an organization called UNFFE. UNFFE is an organization known as Uganda National Farmers Federation. It was allocated 606 million shillings from the Global Fund money. The Commission recommended a quote, IGG to investigate selection and allocation of global funds to UNFFE, or whether the interference of Mohuez and Dr. Muhwewa's directions in the selection and allocation process caused financial loss to PMU. Remember that term, financial loss, is now a technical legal term. It is one of the crimes under corruption, under the Corruption and Anti-Corruption Act. The staff of UNFFE who received the salaries were also paid allowances in the amount of 21 million shillings. Then we have the case of the minister Kamugisha, like Jim Mohuez. He had a political influence in the allocation of general fund money and the selection of sub-recipients. An organization called Top 1 Week Investments Limited, or TOWI, was allocated 31,600,000 shillings. TOWI did not even apply directly to the general fund for funding, but instead made a general request to Honorable Kamugisha for funds. PMU instructed TOWI to develop a proposal and work plan for the amount allocated. Mr. Bariabawi was director of both TOWI and the Kigezi Universal Artists. Therefore, TOWI's payment of 24 million shillings to Kigezi Universal Artists was a conflict of interest. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry recommended investigation of the process for the selection of TOWI as a sub-recipient and refund of the money paid to Kigezi Universal Artists. Probably the most damning conclusion the Commission made on the political influence was the blame it heaped on Muhwez's head. In unequivocal terms, the Commission pointed out the accusing finger directly where legal responsibility lay. It wrote, Honorable Muhwezi should take responsibility for wrongly choosing Dr. Muhwebwa in the preference of Dr. Mutumba, who had been rated the best candidate by the recruitment consultants, who had faulted Dr. Muhwebwa for lack of management skills and competence, unquote. The Commission, in its conclusion, even though it had good intentions, was a little too naive not to understand the nature and consequences of institutional corruption. Muhwez was not concerned about competence within NRM. His main objective, obviously, was to line his pockets and to serve the best interests of NRM, not Uganda. Indeed, the response of the government of the Commission to the Commission's comment says it all. In their white paper, the government did not mince words. They wrote, Dr. Muhwebwa was properly appointed as project manager of PMU, unquote. In other words, Dr. Muhwebwa served the best interests of NRM. The rest was deemed irrelevant. It takes a miracle for to convince this speaker narrating these stories that a regime with that kind of attitude can crack down on corruption. People in Uganda have been wondering why corruption was getting worse. The explanation is simple. The NRM regime is now a captive of war. It is a war prisoner of its own corruption. Institutional corruption affects the entire system, not just a few individuals whom you arrest and solve the problem. Probably the next story will enlighten and reinforce this conclusion. In February 2005, Jim Muhwebwa and Dr. Kamugisha requisitioned 40,000 shillings from PMU, supposedly for the two ministers, Jim Muhwebwa and Alex Kamugisha, to go on quote-unquote supervision visits of Global Fund activities in Uganda. The operation had all the characteristics of an emergency. The funds were processed and approved in one day. In this particular case, the Judicial Commission was convinced that indeed Jim Muhwebwa, the minister, instructed the permanent secretary to requisition for this money under the guise of supervision and inspection of PMU activities in the districts. In reality, the money was right from the word go intended for payment of the medical bills incurred by Matthew Ruchikaire in Nairobi. This is borne out by the extraordinary speed with which the requisition of the money was processed and the expeditious and smooth arrangements within which the money was dispatched to Nairobi via the Uganda High Commission in Nairobi. It is quite evident that all the requisite stages and processes in this convoluted drama had been efficiently and surgically pre-arranged by all the concerned actors, including PMU's project coordinator, Dr. Muhwebwa, who had the final responsibility to approve the disbursement. Obviously, the minister never went, the two ministers never went on any supervision activity in the district. The whole process was fraudulent and therefore illegal. What is important for us here is it was the typical product of institutional corruption because it was aimed at serving a collective corrupt political goal. This case bears all the characteristics of institutional corruption. A lot of individuals were involved in the process in order to accomplish a single collective political goal. The ministers, Jim Muhwebwa and Dr. Kamugisha, The permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health is Dr. Mohamed Kezara. The coordinator of PMU, Dr. Muhweba, were all actively involved. Even the president himself was directly involved. It was a corrupt decision. Museveni is the one who sent a note to Muhwezi to get this money to send it to Ruchikaire. And in my opinion, that alone, Museveni doing that is an impeachable offense. Prior to diverting the money from the Global Fund, Muhwezi is quoted saying that he informed the permanent secretary that government had decided, quote, government had decided to meet Ruchikaire's hospital bills in Nairobi. Muhwezi's instructions to the permanent secretary, according to the commission, were in compliance with the letter from His Excellency the President to the minister, requiring the minister to assist Mr. Ruchikaire. It was therefore absurd, indeed a naked lie, for Honorable Muhwezi to have claimed, as he did in his sworn testimony of 21st March 2006, that he did not know what his personal assistant, Mr. Kagumire, did with the money he collected to send to Ruchikaire in Nairobi. A crucial element in institutional corruption is clearly established in Ruchikaire's case. The whole venture was executed in accordance with an established chain of command. We do not have to speculate whether the enterprise would have been gotten off the ground without the approval of the president, since the commission found the so-called smoking gun in the instructions from His Excellency. Moreover, the money was sent through the Ugandan embassy. No one would dare involve foreign envoys in a secret and illegal venture of that nature. The president was not aware of it. It simply violates the principal protocol or claim of command, the chain of command within the administration. But here lies a serious problem, which in ordinary parlance is comparable to a landmine liable to explode anytime when it triggered or mishandled. It is a criminal offense and a corrupt act, for that matter, to divert money from the Global Fund to ineligible recipients such as Ruchikaire. Remember, one of the offenses I pointed out was diversion. Diversion is another corruption offense. So this was diversion of money from the Global Fund to an individual in Nairobi. That in itself is a crime. It beats me to see that these prosecutors, so-called prosecutors of Uganda, could fail to find all this information, which I have, and is clear, and I'm passing it out so people can know it. And these prosecutors could not find this, a way of prosecuting these people. So you see here the dilemma, the paradox, and the gravity of the matter we are dealing with. Institutional corruption is a very serious matter, and when it comes to NRM, it is beyond treatment. So when the president endorsed or even authorized the diversion of funds in clear instructions to the minister, he violated his oath to uphold the Constitution and enforce the laws of Uganda. He deliberately violated the rule of law, which is an impeachable offense under the Constitution. The presidential oath runs as follows. I, in this case, of course, Museveni, swear in the name of the Almighty God, solemnly and affirm that I shall faithfully exercise the functions of the President of Uganda and shall uphold, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and observe the laws of Uganda, and that I shall promote the welfare of the people of Uganda. So help me God. Now, that is the presidential oath. They protected the welfare of the people of Uganda, like the teachers. He is not doing. Instead, he wants to arrest them because they are protesting and striking and refusing to go to work for being underpaid or even not being paid at all. So you can see the gravity of the problem we are facing. The problem of political influence, which we discussed in the above, is a typical characteristic of institutional corruption. It re-emerges in Ruchikaire's story with unmitigated urgency. It was documented by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, which wrote, 1. The PMU was entirely docile and compliant to the instructions of the minister and the requisition of the permanent secretary, Minister of Health, completely oblivious to the normal empirical factors needed to justify a requisition for this kind of disbursement. To that extent, the PMU project coordinator bears equal responsibility for the resulting diversion of PMU's funds as to the minister and the permanent secretary, Ministry of Health, unquote. Those are words of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. Now, how much has been done to go after these people? Absolutely nothing. The poor Chei, Teddy Chei, is in prison. Well, where is Muhwezi, or Kamugisha, or Mukulu? They are out having fun, probably enjoying the loot. As we pointed out above, this case is an excellent illustration of institutional corruption. First, we look at the characters involved and how they were interwoven into the drama. Historical data is important in order to explain and understand the Rukikaire drama fully. There is no doubt that the minister, Jim Muhwezi, is one of the original pillars in the NRM system. He fought in the Bush War and was certainly rewarded with the lucrative position of Minister of Health and other high positions in NRM for his past contribution to the fortunes of NRM. The person whose medical bills were being paid in Nairobi was an NRM insider who acted as an external diplomat for NRM during the Bush War. He was also involved in fundraising for NRM fighters in the bush. I know this because I met him here in Boston when they were traveling with the late Kategaya. After the war, he served as Minister of the Cabinet under Museveni. Therefore, everything had to be done to pay back to this hero of NRM by finding the necessary funds to pay for his medical bills in Nairobi. Given the amount of money involved, the sharp NRM minds resorted to corruption as the easiest, the quickest, and the most efficient solution to their needs. The game obviously had to be played within the specific NRM institutional framework. Otherwise, it would not have succeeded. The law was explicitly against the corrupted project, but nevertheless, they went forward and executed it with the compliance and the knowledge and the participation of the president himself. On the other hand, the man who was at the center of the practical implementation of the project, Dr. Muhwebwa, PMU's project coordinator, was appointed to that position in a very dubious procedure, namely corruptly. Someone within the scheme should be credited with the sharp corrupt foresight. Dr. Muhwebwa, in spite of all his failings and managerial incompetence, had all the incentive and apparently the ability, but not a good conscience, to refuse to deliver the goods. The more qualified candidate for the position, Dr. Mutumba, most likely not being an NRM inside, was not appointed to the position, but instead Dr. Muhwebwa, who was less qualified and certainly an incompetent manager, as the Commission of Inquiry found, was appointed. Dr. Mutumba would have been an obstructionist, and as a result was not qualified for the strategic position in PMU, in the Ministry of Health. So far, it seems the pieces are falling into place. Who told you corruption does not pay, at least in the short run? And why do you think democracy is the best solution to corruption? This analysis fits well into the institutional structure we are dealing with and trying to comprehend. It explains why democracy punishes corruption. It also explains why corruption militates against and frustrates democracy and development. The two cannot comfortably coexist harmoniously. The more incompetent staff you recruit in the administration, the less efficient the system works. But at the same time, the more you benefit from corruption. And that's what is going on in Uganda today. So, where is the incentive to love democracy? No wonder corrupt dictators do everything possible to annihilate the opposition, thinking erroneously, obviously, that they are working in the interests of the whole society by encircling a small clique of within their own political circle. This reminds me, I may divert a little bit here, it reminds me of this man called Museveni talking about patriotism and calling upon teachers to be patriotic. All dictators are narcissistic individuals. They simply think about themselves alone. Being narcissistic personalities, and by the way, we will have a conversation on this particular topic later on. Being narcissistic, they cannot be patriotic. Museveni could not have been doing what I'm exposing here if he was patriotic, if he was concerned about the concern of the teachers, the poverty, the hospitals that have no medication, the doctors who are not paid properly. That he would not be buying planes, jet fighters. Instead, he would be, if he was patriotic, he would be doing something to improve the life, the welfare of all Ugandans. But corruption does the opposite. And as I will later on point out, there is no cure to this disease except regime change. And anybody who thinks you can cure this deadly disease, they have either not understood the nature of the disease and how seriously it infects the body politic, especially of Uganda today. There is no doubt that the permanent secretary, Minister of Health at the time, Mohamed Kezara, was working for NRM too. If not originally, at least a convert, because he was strategically placed within the Ministry of Health to execute corrupt decisions efficiently in order to achieve the illegal objectives of the diverting global fund money. This story rudely reminds the speaker of a stupid debate in the 60s and 70s. It was about whether civil servants should be politicized in order to make them perform their duties efficiently, effectively, and better, not to mention efficiently. Julius Nyerere, Milton Obote, and Picho Ali, God bless their hearts, rest in peace, were staunch advocates of the policy I'm talking about, of politicizing the civil service. Democracy, however, prohibits politicized civil servants for a good and obvious reason. Now we understand why from a real life experience I've been narrating. In Ruchikairi's story, obviously, a reliable, really politicized or corrupted civil servant is needed in that position as an accounting officer, permanent secretary, to prevent any leakages of information concerning corruption in the ministry. What is important to point out is the fact that the Minister of Health, Jim Mwezi, who made the critical decisions to divert the money from the Global Fund, was not even part of the legitimate PMU management staff. He wasn't supposed to be. His involvement simply emphasizes the institutional and therefore corrupt nature of the enterprise the actors were involved in. Institutional corruption in Ruchikairi's story contains all the necessary elements that weave together institutional corruption. There is unquestioned compliance with the authority within a chain of command right from the top to the bottom. Irregular procedures collectively followed by are involved diversion of funds characterized as departmental borrowing by the permanent secretary involving several actors was in breach of the rules and procedures that the minister who had no authority to make the decision for PMU, but in fact made them, and they were illegally implemented without questions asked. A politicized permanent secretary is in the Ministry of Health who short-circuited the normal procedures and had his actions approved by the superiors. And finally, the recipient of the funds who did not qualify to benefit from the Global Fund, but in fact enjoyed them, thanks to his comrades in NRM, the so-called originals or historicals. These are the classic indicators of institutional corruption, in which several actors are involved, acting in cooperation with to attain an illegal objective directed by the regime culture. No single individual could have accomplished the goal of paying Matthew Ruchikaire's medical bills in Nairobi using Global Fund money legally. A corrupt network within an institutional framework had to exist first. The cycle of institutional corruption is complete in this particular case, but the whole story, in fact, is not yet over. I see that my time has elapsed. I'm sorry I started late because there was confusion in the changes in the programming, and I'll be back tomorrow in the morning